Apparently last time our session did not get recorded. So a little bit later today, I'm going to review some of what we went through in the first session so that we get it on record, and that way retirees who can't join us today can. I think the first thing I'd like to do is introduce to you a special guest we have with us today. Dennis Smeltzer is a radio operator volunteer for the City of Overland Park's emergency management team. He's a drone pilot. If we didn't have a spike in the Omicron variant, we had planned on having Dennis give us a tour of the Emergency Operations Center a week or so from now. We're going to put that off and hope to schedule it at a later date. But Dennis, we're so glad to have you with us. And I think I'm going to let you take over the first part of the meeting. And then if you need to leave to do some other things, you can do that and we will carry on. So Dennis, thanks for being with us.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much for having me. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, good. So we got that down. Let's see if we can share screens. That could be a challenge, right? That always is. All right, that's step 2. We'll actually see, I've got some embedded video, so we'll see if that works as well as we go through this. So I was asked to give a presentation. Again, as she mentioned, I tell you, it's too bad that we're in the middle of this COVID thing, because it really would be nice for you guys to be down here, and hopefully we'll be able to do that in the future for you to be able to see what we do here in the Emergency Operations Center. It's quite a room here, and there's a lot that can happen, but it gives you a better idea of what we do as a city to prepare and to manage emergencies. But what I wanted to do is I was asked to give a presentation on disaster preparedness. So what you're going to find is I've actually taken 3 presentations and kind of put them into one. And I keep the disaster preparedness itself kind of small within the whole scope of things. Let me talk a little bit about myself, just so you know, is I actually still have a full-time job right now. I'm president of an alliance of computer manufacturers. I've been doing that since 1993. I got involved in Overland Park's emergency management as a volunteer starting in 2014. And I essentially run what they call the Community Emergency Response Team program, which has got some things that outreach to that we call emergency response volunteers as well. But I do a lot of these presentations. I work with the emergency manager here, Kyle Burns, in doing a lot of emergency management operations and exercises. I'm also the co-chair for the Community Education Committee with the Mid-America Regional Council. So I get involved in a lot of these kind of things, fly drones for the city. Kyle is actually a department of 1. So a lot of things that he gets pulled off on, I end up getting to do. So I get involved in quite a few things. It's been a lot of fun. And again, if I didn't like it, I wouldn't have been here since 2014. So I wanted to talk a little bit about emergency management, because everybody understands, okay, the police department does this and the fire department does this and public works does this, but when it comes to emergency management, a lot of people don't really understand what it is. So I wanted to touch a little bit about what it is that we do. I would also tell you that what is different about Overland Park from a lot of different jurisdictions, especially within the region, is that Kyle Burns, who's the emergency manager here for the city, reports directly to the city manager, just like the fire chief and just like the police chief does. And I think what that does is kind of set emergency management up as its own department. It doesn't, like in Olathe and other cities, you're going to find that it typically falls under the fire department. It falls under fire departments a lot, but sometimes it'll fall under a police department, things like that. It also gives Kyle a direct, path to the city manager, and the city manager to know exactly what's going on with this department without any of the other things kind of, conflicting with that. So it's broken down, emergency management is broken down into these 4 phases. Okay, there's the preparedness phase, which I'll talk a little bit about CERT, but a lot of that's what we're doing here is to talk about public outreach, what you can do to better prepare. We've got social media feeds like on Twitter and things like that. There is a response phase to emergency management. It is typically more of a support function. So if we were to have a disaster, let's take something, I'm sure that some of you would remember the City Place fire that we had a few years ago, right? It was a big operation, the biggest fire that we've had in the city of Overland Park. Well, we opened up our emergency operations center, and from a response phase, what we did was we were supporting the operations that were going on out there. During a tornado, we might be doing things like making sure that there's food and water for the first responders that are out there. Would we open up a shelter? Would we do things like that? There's a whole series of things that we practice here in the response phase. The recovery phase is the largest and most, or actually I'll say gruesome phase, because if you think about what you had to do to get a city back to normal operations after a big disaster, it can be a very, very long and extensive effort. Just think about Joplin tornado. They're just now really getting back to a normal phase. But emergency management's involved in that recovery piece of that, right? We're involved, in fact, in the City Place fire, in the recovery piece, and getting all of those families back to normal. So things like that. And then there's a whole mitigation phase that has to do with, what can we do to help mitigate any disasters? Can we build tornado shelters? Can we put up levees for potential floods and things like that? So we work with all the departments to do that kind of thing. So I just really wanted to give you sort of a feel about what emergency management did and where we kind of fit into the whole stack of things that are going on. I've only got one slide on emergency preparedness, and I'm going to take you to a website that'll give you all that information. But typically what I do is I give out this little booklet that has got a bunch of information in it that I'll show you where the website is. But when we teach classes here, and I'm going to talk about CERT here in just a minute, what we really emphasize in the preparedness piece of this is have a plan. Right? In most people, if they have a plan, they find themselves coming through a disaster or a catastrophic event a whole lot better than the people that don't, right? So if just nothing more, and that plan should be customized to you, whether it happens to be tornado, flood, whether it's just, like we have now right now, we got winter issues. Sometimes we have heat warnings in the summertime. Have a plan. Think about a tornado, which is the highest risk that we typically have from a catastrophic event perspective. Think about, okay, you come in, maybe your house isn't destroyed, but it's affected by it. What are you going to have? Well, what you're not going to have is probably communications. So how would your family know where you're going to be if you were affected and you couldn't get back to your, where would you go? Have a plan, talk about things like that, and exercise that plan if you can. Discuss it, practice it, right? Do those kind of things. I'm going to go out of this for just a second, and I want to go to a website because I know people always say, "Oh, well, what do I get in a plan? How do I make a kit?" If you want to write down this website, this is an excellent source for you to go to. It's called preparemetrokc.org. It is kind of customized to the Kansas City area, but we get into things about knowing the risks here. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but we go through all the things about these natural disasters and things that you can help to better prepare yourself. It goes into making a plan, what you should have into getting a kit, how to stay informed. If you're not familiar with things like Notify JOCO, which will keep you abreast of not only weather warnings, but if it could be active shooter events, gas leaks, things like that, notifyjoco.org. is where you can go up to sign up for that. And we have the ability to send out notifications to you. So, and by the way, if you want to interrupt me during this, please go ahead and do so. So let's see. So anyway, there's another site out there called ready.gov. And I would recommend that. That gets it a little bit more into the business side, and it's a little bit higher level. It's more like a FEMA site that they put together, but both of these sites will give you a really good idea if you're looking to make a 72-hour kit or you want to be prepared for some kind of disaster or emergency. These are the sites that I would suggest that you go to. Like I said, I'm not going to spend a ton of time going through, what's already there. You guys can look at those things and prepare a kit for yourself and decide what's going to be best for you. So the next phase of this that I wanted to talk about is if you want to take that next step in really getting prepared, then you can look at taking this program that we sponsor here in Overland Park called CERT. It is the Community Emergency Response Team. It essentially is going to teach you how to help yourself, how to help your neighbors or your whole neighborhood should there be a catastrophic event. And I've got a slide here that'll kind of show you what it would look like if we had a disaster like a Joplin tornado that came through Overland Park. It's a tool that we use, and I'll get into that. But in general, what I wanted to do is talk to you about this program. And we put this on. I've got, I'll talk about the people that I've been through it, but essentially it is a FEMA-based program. In Overland Park, we make it a 7-week program. And what we do is take you how to prepare for yourself in an event like a catastrophe, like a tornado that were to come through. How would you organize search and rescue events? How do you shut off gas and water? We even give you the tools of how to do that. How would you mark entry and exit into search and rescue? And when you do that, how do you set up a triage area? How do you do medical triage, things like that? It's an outstanding program. If you're interested in doing it, I highly recommend that you do it. The whole concept here is that if we have a really big catastrophic event that were to come through here, it's going to overwhelm our first responders. And this is teaching you, again, how to take care of yourself, how to take care of others in an event like that. And so we really walk you through the details of it. And I've had a lot of people that have told me this is just really has set them up, and they are a lot less worried about should an event come through. Now they know what to do. In essence, these are the things. I'm not going to read this or I can go through it, but essentially this is what we take you through as far as the major units of the course. The preparedness obviously is a big piece, but fire suppression. There's 2 weeks of medical operations. We don't teach you CPR. What we do is we teach you how to triage patients should there be something, a major medical issue involved in it. Reason we don't teach CPR is the whole mantra of the CERT program is to do as much for as many people without doing any harm. And if you're taking time to do CPR on one person, we're assuming that there are many more others that you could help out. So you want to try to do as much help as you can for as many people. Again, the search and rescue is a big part. We even get into the psychology of it. We talk about terrorism, talk about communications. We spend a lot of time talking about organization. Something you can do in your neighborhood is, how would I organize? We've just had a tornado come through here. What could I do to organize my neighbors to help us out and to help save as many lives as you possibly could? And at the end of it, we have a little exercise that we take everybody through. If I can pull it off here, I'm going to show you a video on that. Let me see if this is going to work. Now, let me know if the audio comes through. May not. There.
Not hearing anything, Dennis.
Not hearing anything?
No.
All right. Okay. I don't know how to solve that problem.
Okay.
Let me try to get to the next slide here. All right. That's too bad. I was afraid of that. Anyway, here at Overland Park, right, this program we started back in 2014. I've had over 300 people that have gone through the class. Right now, I've got about 200 people on my waiting list. But actually I've been able to get people in pretty quickly. We run the course typically one evening per night, runs for about 3 or 4 hours, and we run it again for about 7 weeks, or it is 7 weeks. And the class size we limit down to 25 because we try to keep this as much as not one-on-one training, but we want to keep it a small group because it's a lot of information that we're pushing through in 7 weeks. It used to be a 6-week course, and all of our students came back to us and said, you need to actually increase this. It's too much information for us to absorb within a 6-week period of time. A lot of it is taught by our fire department. and that's where they get into the medical piece of it as well. But these guys do a fantastic job of teaching. So again, I highly recommend it. What we do after that, if you want to get more involved.
And she sent an email. She sent one out and said, now then with coronavirus being what it is, she said, if you don't want to participate, let me know by tomorrow. So I was going to ask you, what do you think?
Well, I would certainly attend if I could.
Not sure where that's coming. Can you hear me?
Okay,
My class.
Yeah, I can hear you. Somebody needs to mute
I just meant
themselves and
what
have
I
a
wanted to go
conversation.
to that, 'cause
Well, you've been through it before.
Here we go. So once they get through the program, we actually set up a team, and they're able to come in and assist the first responders or assist in doing events and things like that. We've actually deployed out to do debris management and helping out with that when we've had a storm come through the area. So there's basically two types of deployment. Either self-deployment would be we've had a really major catastrophic event and you would just go out there and help out your neighborhood, or we can actually deploy you if you want to become part of the CERT team and participate in that. We go on to further training in that. We've got a disaster animal response team. So if we did have a disaster, we would actually, along with the Red Cross, be able to set up a animal response shelter right next to that. We've gone through the state requirements for that. So we've got several people that have done that. We do things like emergency sign language training, communication, stop the bleed training, and then we work events, crowd control. We've actually been able to find several lost children during events and public outreach and things like that. We've also been out on 2 search and rescue efforts, one the coldest day of the year and one the hottest day of the year, that we were actually able, and we went out and found a lady that had been missing, I think for about 72 hours. She was someone down at Tallgrass that had been missing, and we were actually able to assist the police department in finding her. So there's a lot we do outside of just the normal training. I put this slide in here just because I thought it would be interesting from a neighborhood preparedness perspective. These would be some of the things that I would look at if I was in my neighborhood and I had an active homeowners association and I wanted to be able to help out in a catastrophic event. These would be the things that I would look at, right? And again, I'm not going to go through them, but basically try to take an account of what your resources are, what your vulnerabilities might be, how would you communicate with people, do a lot of what if scenarios, maybe assign block captains, look at and see if you can sign. You may have fire people, you may have medical people are already in the neighborhood that could help you out. Know who those people are and how you'd be able to assist your neighborhood. I would get into a lot more detail on that if we were doing a one-on-one and you wanted to know what you could do in your neighborhood. And just to kind of give you a reality check here. So if I took the Joplin tornado and overlaid it on Overland Park in Johnson County, this is what it would look like. And over here on the right-hand side to give you an idea of what kind of damage would be done. And you can see here we'd have 3 fire stations out. We'd have 46 hazmat sites, 2 hospitals affected, 4 nursing homes, and 2 schools. So if this were to happen during the daytime and something like that were to happen, I can guarantee in your neighborhood it's going to be a while before the first responders get to you. That's why we teach a program like CERT, for you to be able to understand that, of what you can do and better prepare yourself. This is the last piece that I'm going to talk about. I've got a whole presentation on severe weather. What I've done is I've taken that and parsed it into just a few slides here. This is information that's given out by the National Weather Service out in Pleasant Hill when they do spotter talks. And what they do is they go through identifying the different types of thunderstorms. I took that and parsed it down to just this one category of thunderstorm we call supercells. And I picked this because this is the kind of thunderstorm that's going to give you, and the kind of storm that's going to give you the Joplin tornado, right? These are the bad ones. So if you hear supercell, then that's when you want to pay attention to something really bad could happen. And again, I highly recommend Notify Joco as well as having a weather radio. But basically just kind of walk you through what a supercell is. And you'll see this, you might see this on from the local meteorologist. This is what they call a hook echo. That's an indication of rotation in that storm. And this one doesn't rotate. But on the outside, if you were looking at it, you're going to see this like a wall cloud. Most of you know that in this hemisphere, if you have a low pressure system, it rotates counterclockwise. 9 times out of 10, you're going to see that this is going to be rotating counterclockwise. So if it has any rotation to it, which is a sign that you need to be concerned about it, then it's typically going to be rotating counterclockwise. But they rotate slowly, so it's kind of hard to tell. So you might want to look for that as well. This is another indication. This would be a lowering out here. I'd be obviously concerned about this, but here's your wall cloud, and you see this lowering of stuff coming in. Again, another one right here, give you an indication. And one of these I've got a time lapse on. I think you can see that. You can see that's rotating counterclockwise. This is obviously sped up a lot, right? But
Right.
give you an idea of what they do. So one things I will tell you, right, is when we do spotter talks and things like that, that a lot of times, and if you were here, I would show you the 911 dispatch center is right behind us here. They get a lot of phone calls when severe weather is out there from people that really don't know what they're looking at. And we call, a lot of those times, we call those SLCs, which is scary looking clouds. But sometimes they'll be shelf clouds and they can be scud. But if you're looking and you think you're seeing a tornado, what we ask you to do is just make sense of it. Is there watches and warnings out from the National Weather Service? Have there been other funnel clouds that have been spotted in the area or have been spotted out west? Typically, these are moving from west to east. Do you see a wall cloud or something like that? Because there can be a lot of lookalikes out there that you want to be careful about. But again, right, if it's something that you think has got the potential of spitting down a tornado and they've got to watch out, I would certainly take shelter to it. This is kind of goes into the category of maybe something you didn't know this. So when we set off the tornado sirens, those are typically set off on a county level, although we have the ability to set them off at a local level. Here in Overland Park, we have that capability. Not all cities have that. One of the things that happens at the county level is they have a group of storm spotters that go out and will sit out at static locations. And they communicate back and forth via amateur radio, and that's what this is right back here. This is the radio room, and then these are the duty officers at the county level that are monitoring the storms, and these would be the guys that would typically set off the sirens. And the sirens are set off in zones, so that if you're in the southern part of Johnson County and you don't hear a tornado siren, but you hear somebody that does up in the northern part of the county, that's okay. Because we have the ability to set them off. There's 6 different zones. This is kind of the radar that we use. You'll hear this a lot on local TV. This is basically a reflectivity versus a velocity scan here that gives you the idea. This over on the right-hand side tells you whether the information you're getting is moving towards the radar or away from it. And when you get this green versus red right here, that typically can be associated with rotation. So you combine these two together, and that's where the National Weather Service will come out and say, well, this looks like there's a tornado, looks like we've got rotation, so I'm going to go ahead and going to trigger off a tornado warning for that area. Again, I talk about this is the ECS, this is the storm spotting folks that are out there. They're qualified train spotters. They're not chasers, and they go out to static locations, dispatch out by the county. And we monitor them here as well as the county monitors them. They give us a lot of good information. Many times when radar doesn't spot something, one of these spotters will be able to see it. So that's another thing that we use. This is a map of that overlay of the radar, and all these locations right here are storm spotting. These are the static locations. I talk about radar quite a bit. They've made huge advances in what you can see. What you can't see, what I would tell you is radar is still, it's going to be it's coming out of Pleasant Hill. And by the time it gets over here to Johnson County, it's about 5,000 feet and up the air just by the curvature of the earth. And so therefore anything below that 5,000 feet marker, they're not going to be able to see. That's actually pretty good. When you get out into some of the rural areas, we could be talking about 15 to 20,000 feet that national weather, the radar doesn't see below that point. That's why national weather and why we have spotters is for ground truth, to be able to tell us what's really going on out there. This is kind of a map of the county. So each one of these are tornado sirens. Again, these are set off in zones. Overland Park has, I believe it's 29 of them. And again, we can set those off separately. If for some reason the county system didn't work, we have the ability to set them off as well. Those are owned by the city, by the way. And then this is just another example of a hook echo. I think this one's going to rotate. You can see that's counterclockwise. I'll just give you an indication of that right there is rotation, and that would be what we consider to be a tornado. Okay, let's see how I did. I did 330. Not too bad. I think that's going to be my last slide. Any questions on any of that I covered? It was a lot of information.
I don't know if I missed it or not, but do you have to live in Overland Park to do cert training in Overland Park?
No.
Okay, I have actually done cert training, but it's a good, oh my goodness. over 13 years ago. It's about 14 years ago, 15 years ago.
I would highly recommend you come back and do a refresher.
Well, it's obviously going to be quite different, I think.
Yeah, I guess I would ask you, are there things that you remember out of that training?
Oh, I remember a lot of things out of that training.
Yeah.
So I try to be able to think that during our bad weather time that I can actually be of value to people even now, even though it's been that long.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, I've had people that have gone through programs throughout the country. As you're aware, you know, you could take CERT training here and you could move to Phoenix and become part of their CERT team, right? It's all throughout the country. But I've had people that have gone through the training and want to come back and do it again here, and I have no problems with that whatsoever. You could do that, go through the training here, be more than happy. I'm sure there's been updates to it. There have been since I've been involved in it in the last, I've been involved in it for 15 years. So, but we have the best training here in Overland Park.
I do have a question though pertaining to the training and COVID. We are in the middle of a pandemic still. So does that make it, if we were in the middle of the pandemic and say today we had some awful thing happen, are things done any different than, or we just wear masks and do the same thing?
PPE.
Okay.
Right. I mean, you know, we don't do, well, like I said, we don't do CPR anyway, but even if you did CPR, you probably wouldn't do mouth to mouth. You do hands-on CPR. But I would say no. And we've gone out on deployments and we obviously mask up and we'll put on gloves if necessary. But we're still doing, I've done actually 3 training sessions during COVID on CERT. Now, what I've found is that I don't get as many people as I normally would. And I understand that, right? Because people are hesitant to get into a small room. And you've been through the training, it's very hands-on, right? So we've actually postponed our latest class primarily because of COVID and hoping that I'll get another one started up in March. But the answer to your question is, yeah, we do a lot of PPE and we try to social distance, but you just do what you can do.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
It's not a question, but I might add that if you have to be in an emergency situation or otherwise close to people, double masking is not a bad idea. My husband plays for a band, and that band played in Branson, Missouri on New Year's Eve, and most of the audience was not masked. and the singers couldn't be masked and the horn players couldn't be masked. Bob wore a double mask. Other members of the band tested positive for COVID in the next week. Bob tested negative because he had a KN95 covered by a cloth mask, and he wore it the whole time, and he's a keyboard player. So double masking can be very helpful. Any other questions for Dennis?
I have one. I assume your center is underground. Is that right?
Yes, it is. So if we have a tornado, I go to the safest place in Overland Park.
And then what would that, like if it went right over you, would it wipe out your communications ability, like your antennas and all of that stuff?
It would, if it went right over us, it would take out some of my communications capabilities, but not all of them, because a lot of them are fiber optics. So I've got the ability, because our 911 dispatch center is here, right?
Okay.
So we're not going to lose that. If we did, actually, we are the backup for the county here. So if the county loses their dispatch, which is a multiple dispatch, I'd love to be here to explain this to you. So what we dispatch here out of our 911 center is Overland Park Police. If we were to have an issue that was a medical issue, we actually then transfer you over to Olathe out of what they call the ECC, and all of fire and medical is dispatched out of ECC. But we are the backup for the ECC if they needed to come over here. But the ECC is in Olathe off Sunset. There's the health departments over there. There's a lot of government areas, buildings that are over there, and they dispatch a lot of things out of there, not just medical, but they dispatch, I think, Prairie Village, Olathe PD, the sheriff's department is all dispatched out of there. Okay.
Dennis also told us when we toured the EOC that there's a whole section in the EOC for ham radio operators, and sometimes that's more effective than cell phones or satellite phones, and right?
It is. So, and that's one of the things that I push for our CERT people is to go through the amateur radio training. We use it during our events. We used it during those search and rescue efforts because some of the radios that we have for our first responders are these things right here. I don't know if you can see that. They're great radios, but they're also $3,500 a piece, right? And I can't afford to give that to a bunch of people. So we actually utilize amateur radio that I have not only here in the EOC, I've got it in our police mobile command center. I've got it in my CERT trailers. The county has it. Olathe's got it. All the jurisdictions have it. And it's a great backup resource. I can talk to the county without even any kind of an infrastructure. I can just get on the radio and talk to them right away.
Great. Any other questions for Dennis? Or thoughts or? Nothing right now? Dennis, thank you so much for your presentation and your time. And I wouldn't be too surprised. I think besides tomorrow, I think Lori took CERT training sometime back, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
We took it through the college, through Johnson County Community College. Do they still offer it? Or do they still have their employees still go through the training?
So I work with the emergency manager out of JUCO, Elisa. And she's basically turning them over to me.
Okay.
So they're going through our training.
Okay.
But I've had a lot of people out of Johnson County that have been, the college have been trained.
Okay.
Who pays for the training?
So it's right now, it's either grant funded by some of the equipment, or in the case of the Overland Park, all the city officials have decided this is really valuable, so they're flipping the bill for it. So from the I mean a lot of the equipment that we get can be funded through grants, and some of the training we can kind of defer off to some grant money, but the rest of it is actually coming from the city.
Anything else?
I have one question. This is kind of grim to think about, but if North Korea launched a missile at us, is there a plan for that?
Yes, depends on a lot of factors, right? And I would say It's not something that we necessarily practice, although in a lot of our exercises, we've got a whole emergency operations plan that gets into hazmat stuff. It gets into shelter in place, gets into what things that we would do. If they send over a nuclear bomb, I don't know what we're going to do, right? And I don't know that you can practice for that, but it's going to depend on so many factors of what would happen. But I guess the point I would say, do we practice for it? There is a process in place for hazmat response, for setting up shelters, for sheltering in place, for notification and communications on a city scale all the way up to a federal scale, right? And what you'd find in a situation like that is, if I run out of resources at a city, where do I go? I go to the county. If the county runs out of resources, where do they go? They go to the state. State runs out of resources, they're going to go to the federal government. In a situation like that, that's going to happen so quickly, and we would have federal resources in here, as best as you can, helping out with something like that. Is there a plan? Yeah, there's a plan.
Okay. Things are so tense worldwide. I was just curious about that.
Yep. Yeah, I think the question is, what can you really do about it depending on what happens, right?
Die.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, Jolly Lynn, thanks.
So that was the grim, you're right.
Remember the movie The Day After? I'm sure you watched it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's why they go sit on your porch and die.
Yeah, there's another phrase. It's not appropriate for this audience. I won't say.
I'll probably know what it is.
I think you probably do. But anyway, hey, listen. I really would like to have you guys down here because it just makes a big difference. And Sheilah can tell you, right, if you're here and you can kind of see the Emergency Operations Center and get an idea of what happens. So let's get through this COVID thing. You guys can come down here.
Okay, Dennis, you had said you were going to point us to the website that had the information that's included in that emergency management booklet that you usually hand out.
And that's the one that I showed. It's the Prepare Metro KC.
Okay, great.
And if you look through that, I apologize right off the top of my head, but I know you can download that same booklet that you're talking about.
Okay.
And what she's talking about is I'd call it a very condensed but concise version of emergency preparedness. Goes through a lot of different things.
And so if people are interested in CERT, is it all right if I share your contact information to the list of retirees?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. Well, Dennis,
All right.
feel free to log off if you've got other things to do, which I reckon you do. But stay with us if you want to. I'm going to repeat some of the things that we covered last week because it didn't get recorded. And these are the things that we were doing in my neighborhood group. So just a little bit of review. Our first session was about what do you do about food, water, heat, and sanitation if you have no electricity or water or natural gas, the things that we rely on to handle those things. And if you have those handouts that were included with the link to this webinar, you will see that there are options there for water storage, and there are some facts there. One person for 14 days. Let's assume that it might take 2 weeks to get something rolling with Red Cross coming in and stations setting up and so forth. One person needs about 15 gallons of water for 14 days. And that's about 7.5 gallons for drinking, 3.75 gallons for cooking, and another 3.75 gallons for washing up. So there are some images in that second handout that you got that have water storage kinds of things, water filtration things. And I think that having those handouts is pretty important in terms of sort of thinking ahead for your preparation. It also suggests there that the World Health Organization suggests 2,100 calories a day per person for food. Now, I mentioned last time, many of us eat less than that. But if you're fit enough to be out trying to help your neighbors move debris or having to walk someplace to find information, you may need that many calories. A reminder that you eat what's in your refrigerator first, in your freezer second, and any non-perishables you have after that. So in terms of cooking, if you have a propane grill outside, you can cook on that. If you have a Coleman stove, there are solar cookers of various kinds. You can find this information on ready.gov, one of those sites that Dennis mentioned, but also there are pictures in the handouts that I gave, and a lot of those photographs just were downloaded from Amazon, so you can find them all kinds of places. One of the things to remember especially is to make your meals as easy as possible. You obviously don't want any kind of complicated recipe, but instant oatmeal, heat some water and put together instant oatmeal with dried cranberries for breakfast, something like that. We talked about MREs, meals ready to eat. That's a possibility, though they are kind of expensive, but that might be in addition to whatever you store, something to sort of back that up with. So, I hope that folks who are seeing this recording now may go back to the email, or maybe Debbie can share again, just so that everybody has the handouts when they want to have them. So one of the things I want to talk a little bit about today is the fact that, well, okay, the day we had the big snowstorm last week, I was out just pushing snow off my driveway. I'm one of those people who I don't want to pick it up and throw it and hurt my back. I just push it around and move it off to the side. And my neighbor across the street, a guy named Dan, came to our last neighborhood emergency preparedness meeting and said, you know what, I'm just getting started with this, but we need to do more of these. We need to have these regularly. So he and I were talking that day. He was out shoveling as well. And he said to me, I have a cottage house on the other side of my house, and I bought some water and I have a generator. And I'm thinking if the neighborhood wants to come together and store some things at my place, if our close neighborhood wants to, we should work on that. We should talk about that. And I thought to myself, and I even said to him, I said, that's so very generous of you to think about that, because we all know there are a lot of people, call them survivalists or whatever you will, whose thought is, I'm going to take care of myself and my family, and to heck with all the rest of you. But we know, as people who have been teachers and part of a wonderful community college, that helping each other is the best way around it. So the handout for today is how we work together going forward. And it's important to be aware of what's going on, and also to kind of come together with a common purpose. So being knowledgeable and alert is really an important piece of this. It's if cell towers are down, if your cell phones don't work, can your neighborhood come up with an idea about, here's where we will post information in our neighborhood? Is it a local park? Is it a church in the neighborhood that someplace outside will find a place to post information that's maybe walkable for people? Streets might be clear enough to drive your car, but you don't want to drive your car so much that you use up all the gasoline if gasoline isn't available to refill your car. So some of them are not always rapid onset. Some of them are slow motion. COVID came on kind of slow. It wasn't an immediate thing. It was like, oh, it's in China. Oh, it's here now. Oh, it's there now. Oh, it's in our country now, right? But it's best to be prepared and to use a variety of information and news sources so that you can, all of us are critical thinkers. You can listen to multiple sources and try to piece together the best information that you can, so that you're making sure you get information that's not biased, right? Use alternative news sources. There are a couple on the handout, the one that says prep summary that came out. DuckDuckGo.com is one. A different social media platform is one called Gab.com. I haven't looked at those. These are some that my neighbor recommended when she put this together. Looking at what other neighborhoods or other communities have done for their emergency preparedness may help you organize your neighborhood or your small group of neighbors. It may not be a great big neighborhood. Maybe you're in a cul-de-sac and you say, everybody in the cul-de-sac, let's plan on how we're going to work on this together, right? So it can be helpful to have a community board of some kind, a person or a few people who together work to organize a neighborhood, a cul-de-sac, and so on and so forth. So think about how large an area you need to cover. How are you going to disseminate information from the city? Are there block coordinators that you can contact who can deliver messages to neighbors on that street? One of the things that we thought about in our neighborhood was applying for a community grant that's available through the neighborhood executive committee to have door hangers printed, and that we would take it upon ourselves to hang them on every door that would say, if there's an emergency, here's where to go to find information. And we have yet to do that, but we need to think about where would that place be. I think I mentioned at our first session that somebody said, well, gee, the city offices are just down the street here at 85th, 87th and Antioch. And I said, there's going to be so much activity at those places. It's not a good place for us to go to look for our information. So instead, maybe the park or maybe someplace else would be a better place for us to go find information. But to the end of thinking about helping each other and how important that is, I hope you don't mind that I might share this with you. I saw this today and it just really struck me about how we can help each other. This reads, my dad has bees. Today I went to his house and he showed me all of the honey he had gotten from the hives. He took the lid off of a 5-gallon bucket full of honey, and on top of the honey, there were 3 little bees struggling. They were covered in sticky honey and drowning. I asked him if we could help them, and he said he was sure they wouldn't survive. Casualties of honey collection, I suppose. I asked him again if we could at least get them out and kill them quickly. After all, he was the one who taught me to put a suffering animal or bug out of its misery. He finally conceded and scooped the bees out of the bucket. He put them in an empty Chobani yogurt container and put the plastic container outside. And because he had disrupted the hive with the earlier honey collection, there were bees flying all over outside. We put the 3 little bees in the container on a bench and left them to their fate. My dad called me out a little while later to show me what was happening. These 3 little bees were surrounded by all of their sisters, and they were cleaning the sticky, nearly dead bees, helping them to get all of the honey off their bodies. We came back a short time later, and there was only 1 little bee left in the container. She was still being tended to by her sisters. When it was time for me to leave, we checked one last time, and all 3 of the bees had been cleaned off enough to fly away, and the container was empty. Those 3 little bees lived because they were surrounded by family and friends who would not give up on them, family and friends who refused to let them drown in their own stickiness and resolved to help until the last little bee could be set free. Bee sisters, bee peers, bee teammates. We could all learn a thing or two from these bees. And that's what sort of today's session is about, is what can you do not only to help yourself. As Dennis pointed out, the Cert training is, first of all, how do you help yourself? Because you're no good for anybody else if you're not okay yourself, right? Help yourself. And then what can you do for your neighbors, for your next door neighbors, for the person across the street, for the elderly person who's absolutely disabled and in a wheelchair and can't get out of their house by themselves? What can we do for each other? So that's kind of the bulk of what I wanted to say today. If there are things, Debbie or Lori in particular, that, or any of you that I said last week that bears repeating, since we're being recorded this time, please remind me, and we can talk about those things and we can ask questions. Anything I didn't mention that I should have from last week or 2 weeks ago? Any questions?
I don't know that I could identify exactly what, or, the different elements that I could repeat today to tell you that you said, but
Okay. Well,
Sorry.
I looked back through the handouts and was trying to kind of remember what I'd said, but I do think if there are retirees who watch this recording, I would remind you that if you can contact Debbie, she will have the handouts, or contact me and I will have the handouts, and we can email those documents to you.
I was just flipping through them real quick, and I think you hit the highlights of the last presentation earlier.
Yeah. No,
and
think-
I just resent the Zoom link on email as well, and the attachments, the 3 attachments.
Great.
Yesterday, those other ones, I sent those out
Yeah,
yesterday.
I saw them.
2.
Thank you. So yeah, lots of stuff to look through. But it's the kind of thing that we have time to do these days, sitting at home, staying at home for the most part. So thank you very much for your interest in this. I really appreciate all of you. And I hope that in addition to getting yourselves prepared, that you might organize a few neighbors or a lot of neighbors so that we can all help each other and help, if there's an emergency. As Dennis said, first responders are going to be absolutely overwhelmed. What can we do for ourselves in the meantime while we're waiting for them to get to us?
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. You all stay safe, and I hope we get to see each other in person soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.